This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, what's up, breakers and burners? This is Fantology Podcast. I'm your host, Steven, and I have Ryan on with me today. Ryan, how's it going?
Good. Glad to get back into First Law.
Back into First Law, and it may be a little bit of a break until the next time we do have more First Law. And before we go any further, we have a special guest. We have half of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast, the one and only Charles.
Hello, Fantology and Fantology fans. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. And what an honor to be invited on the Wisdom of Crowds book discussion. I feel very fortunate. Thank you.
Well, you've been feeling fortunate for several months now, Charles, because you and I have been talking about doing something together. And Wisdom of Crowds was the one that we both had circles on our calendar. So we've both been looking forward to it for a long time, and it's here. And now it's read and in our rearview mirror, but we need to talk about it.
Yeah, we knew this day was coming for months now. So it's very exciting that we're actually here after all of this planning and preparation. It actually went right. Something that maybe some of our Abercrombie fans wouldn't expect.
It didn't feel like that long since The Trouble with Peace came out. Did it feel like a long time for you guys?
They came out like a year apart, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. But I didn't start reading The Age of Madness until just like a few months ago. So I read through all of it in one shot, which was very fortunate for me. I didn't have to wait at all. But the other friend of Friends Talking Fantasy, my co-host Dylan, he's like read The Age of Madness a bunch of times. So I'm sure for him, he would say that he's been very excited to get into it and been anticipating this release for a long time, as I'm sure many people have.
Well, I am the OG member of Fantology to read First Law. I was the first one there.
Nice.
This is true.
That's basically my claim to fame.
Wow, Ryan, that's impressive. Yeah, Dylan was the one who talked me into reading it way back when like the trilogy had just wrapped up. So yeah. No, and it's been an absolute blast ever since.
Yeah, I think the recommendation is great for any fantasy fans. I'm glad that you read and recommended to me, Ryan. I read them all within the last 2 years, and then I did a reread leading up to the Wisdom of Crowds. So it doesn't feel like it's really been that long, but I think the intervening time before we get more First Law is going to feel like a really long time.
Yeah. Especially because Joe hasn't stated any specific plans on when he'll be coming out with the next book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he's considering his options. Who knows what we're going to get, but he's not done writing, that's for sure. So I'm looking forward to whatever it is that comes next.
And I think we can definitely talk about that. I did want to start with, maybe this disclaimer. We're not going to do spoilers at first.
Okay.
So if you haven't read The Wisdom of Crowds yet, you can listen for a little bit. But then we are obviously going to do spoilers. Otherwise, this would be a really boring podcast. So we'll just do like a few minutes of opinions. I don't know, like if you're tuning in trying to gauge if you should read it or not, I don't know how many of these people exist out in the world. Like if you've read The Age of Madness thus far and you're not excited for the third book, I don't really know who you are. You have to finish, obviously. So maybe that's all you need to listen to. And now you can stop listening and start reading.
But there's probably some curious people who want to read it and haven't gotten around to it yet that want to hear the scoop, and you're going to get it, listeners. You're going to get it. So no worries. Don't worry about spoilers.
So, Charles, do you want to give us a little bit of a plug for Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast? Tell us how they can find you. And I mean, maybe a plug from my end is you guys just had a fabulous interview with the man himself, Joe Abercrombie, on your show. So listeners, if you are looking for more First Law content, look no further than Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast.
Stephen, I don't know how to follow up on that. Thank you so much. It's true. If you are a fan of First Law, I find that you guys here on Fantology had some really great insight. Like if you go back to the Blade itself and follow their episodes through it, it's very fascinating to see some of the things they came up with during their discussions there. But we have very recently, one of our last episodes was an interview with Joe. So we're big First Law fans as well. It's something our shows have in common. So we've collaborated a couple times, and we recently had you guys on to do a fun First Law shenanigans episode. And that was a huge blast. So yeah, if you like fantasy books and you like Joe Abercrombie and you like Fantology, well, we give us a try. We're open to it. And yeah, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts at Friends Talking Fantasy.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's get to it. So no spoilers yet. Still no spoilers, guys. If you spoil something now, you're kicked off the show.
It's good you said that, because I was going to open with my reactions to the ending, but I won't.
Yeah, I'm throwing you in the circle immediately if you spoil something, and you're going up against Logan. So no spoilers for The Wisdom of Crowds. What is your just like general opinion of the book? Out of 10, how many numbers do you give it out of 10? And how much did you like it? What types of things did you like or not like, maybe?
I think I would give it probably an 8 out of 10. I feel like it's a typical Joe Abercrombie. I mean, this is the second ending. We have 2 trilogies so far, complete trilogies in the First Law universe. And they're similar in a lot of different ways, because Joe Abercrombie, he's a lot of people call him Grimdark. His Twitter handle is Lord Grimdark. So you come to expect that it's not going to be the happiest endings for our characters. So once you recognize that, which I didn't necessarily understand when I first started reading it, you love the books for what they are. And the plot is fascinating. The prose is great. The twists and turns as you get there are just have you on the edge of your seat. This book really pulls no punches. There's tons of action from beginning to end. You will not be able to put it down if you are a fan of First Law. Now, if you're not a fan of Grimdark and you want happy endings for all of your characters, which I don't know if
how'd you make it this far in the trilogy.
You might not enjoy the book quite as much as you would others. Maybe you should stick to some lighter books. But I think that it is a solid ending of the Age of Madness trilogy. And I can definitely recommend it to any and all fans of Abercrombie.
Yeah, that's really well said, Ryan. And I'm thinking about it now. I don't think I've ever given a rating to a book in my podcasting career. So, Joe, if you're listening, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10, Joe. And Abercrombie, I remember when The Trouble with Peace ended, I was like, where is this other book going to go? There's a whole other book that is about to happen.
Yeah.
And, Abercrombie as an author continues to challenge himself as an author, continues to challenge conventions of storytelling and of fantasy world building. And he brought his world that he has built, this government that he has built, into this new, like, pure realm of chaos. And reading that, it feels like you're really reading something that is like, where is this going? What is happening? This, like, all is kind of up in the air right now. And to me, that was really fascinating to see. I'm torn if I liked it more than Trouble with Peace, because I thought Trouble with Peace was a masterpiece, but this was a very, very strong contributor to the series, and I was a huge fan, and we'll get more into it. But if you just want to know my thoughts, spoiler free, excellent end, very happy, and highly recommend.
So 10 out of 10 is your official rating.
10 out of 10.
Oh, wow. All right. Doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah. No, it does not.
Yeah, Joe, if you're listening, I also give it a 10 out of 10. For non-Joes out there, I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10, which
that's
still,
fair.
Still very solid rating. I don't think Joe can complain too much. There's actually a really funny video of him promoting The Wisdom of Crowds reading 1-star reviews
Yeah.
of some of his other books.
Yeah, he on Twitter also, he always will share 1-star reviews, 5-star reviews. It's always funny.
Yeah. You realize pretty quickly, I'm sure you realize, Charles, having spoken with him, why his books are so funny. Because he's a comic genius out there, very darkly.
Yeah, he was on
comic
the whole time. Any time he could turn what we were talking about into a joke, he'd go for it. So you could tell he does definitely look for the humor in things. And yeah, it shows in his books, because even though they are very like grim and violent, they also have this kind of ironic humor about them that's really dry, but also hilarious and witty too. So
did he have a pretty dark sense of humor on your show?
He would go there sometimes. We are friendly, family friendly on FTF, and we didn't have to, beep him out or anything, but we were going there. So, and he did an AMA on Reddit recently where they were getting into some pretty risque conversation, which was amazing, by the way. But yeah, he was, respectable guy. But if you encouraged him, I think he'd go there.
You didn't have to throw the little E up on that episode.
Nope, no E. Family friendly for all those wondering at home.
Yeah, my review of Wisdom of Crowds, I don't know if I have too much more to add to you guys as far as non-spoilers at least, but I think it's a very Abercrombie book in that you're going to be unsatisfied in the most satisfying way, if that makes any sense, by the end. By the end, you're going to have an ending that maybe you didn't know you wanted it until you did, until it was right there in front of you. At least that's how I felt.
I would agree completely. It's shocking and it's at times depressing, but it's always good. It's always well written. So it's a fine line.
Okay. There end the non-spoiler conversation part of the podcast. Charles made it through. He's not have to go into a circle. Now
you
we
did
will
better
do
than Ben normally does.
Oh, Ben can't keep it together for the spoiler-free section.
He's just too eager. So if you have not read yet, please stop listening. We do not want to be the cause of ruining your experience with the book. Go read it. Come back in. Give us a listen for the second half. Well, maybe for the second 3/4 or so of the podcast. So we will start the spoilers by asking you guys, what was your favorite part of the book? Just one thing, one moment, one aspect, one character, one thing that was your favorite.
My sweet King Orso.
That's what I was going to say.
My prince, but he's not a prince. He's a king.
Yeah.
And they did him dirty. But I loved his character throughout the book. He was resigned to his fate. But I feel like he's just kind of like matured a lot. And, he had this sense of like dark irony, and he has, I felt like he was willing to forgive others, like at the end. He at his hanging, he was just like, I love my sister Savine, and like I don't hold this against you. And this whole time you're reading it, you're like, she's gonna pull something out. She's Savine. She's so capable. She's gonna soldiers are gonna storm in, and they're gonna. But at the end of the day, they didn't, which is typical Abercrombie. And as much as I will miss Orso, he's one of my favorite characters, and he made this trilogy for me. And it's funny because when you started, I don't know about you guys, but when I started reading this trilogy, I did not like Orso. He was, just kind of like just full on debauchery, self-loathing, and but he grew to be one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character by the end of the book.
I don't think he forgave Leo though. The last line to Leo was, "How's your leg?"
Yeah.
Sucker.
I mean, he definitely hates Leo for sure, for many good reasons. One being that he sentenced him to hang to death, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of other stuff that happened before that. But yeah. No.
And one crazy thing that I can't take credit for, I read somewhere else. If if Orso's dad hadn't have done the right thing or the merciful thing and then spared Leo's grandpa. Remember, Leo's grandpa was the one who tried to organize or tried to steal the throne, and Giselle pardoned him, or at least prevented him from hanging. And then later on, Orso, due to Savine's imploring him, he was merciful towards Leo and saved him from hanging. So there were two acts of mercy from members of from Orso's family,
of the
Giselle line,
Mm-hmm.
which ultimately ended in Orso's death. So the theme I'm trying to get at is don't be merciful in the first law universe.
Well,
if you can hang them, hang them.
Because if you don't hang them, they'll hang you.
Exactly.
That's well said, Ryan. And you identified my favorite scene in this book, and that's Orso's hanging. And that comes from this long 3-book payoff that I thought paid off at the end of Trouble with Peace when Orso spared Leo. But then it comes back again when I wasn't expecting it, when he was caught by Leo and hanged again. And I'm like, wow, here's like such a beautiful theme on doing the right thing. And here's a person who's going through genuine self-improvement and may objectively be like an ideal ruler for these people who genuinely cares about doing the right thing. And he just couldn't get anyone to trust him or like him or work with him. And just because you're noble and have all the right things going for you, if politics are against you, politics are against you. You can't escape reality just because you have a good story. And I think that's Orso's tragedy, and so well done. The whole idea of him hating hangings from the beginning, and then just how it describes, he's trying to hold it together, and you can tell he's really struggling, but he sticks to his virtues at the end, and then he just unceremoniously, bam, end of chapter. So that's a fantastic scene. But since you took it, I'm going to quickly just say I loved Ricka's battle against Black Calder. The way that whole battle played out, I thought was really fun and very well written and well paced, and not something I was expecting. I wasn't sure how she was going to turn it out, and the reveal that she had sent some people away on purpose to send this bad reputation about herself out to Calder to make her seem vulnerable, what was really fascinating to me. So that would be the one I'd have to pick.
How did you guys predict that? I saw some people saying that it was a predictable part of the book.
I thought it was too predictable, I have to say.
I knew that there was something going on because I didn't think Isern really was like, I'm done with you, bye, and would just leave like that. So I was like, okay, something's going on. But then the trap that was laid out so clearly for Calder, I still thought was well constructed, because you add in the nail to that, which I wasn't totally sold on. You add in that spy element that you purposely let a spy on you, was interesting as well. I knew there was foul play going on, and I didn't expect her to lose, but I didn't catch all those reveals.
Yeah,
go ahead, Ryan.
I actually mentioned I was talking to Ben about it over the weekend, and I did see a lot of that coming. I didn't see what she was going to do with Stour, because it was pretty clear that she was keeping him alive for a reason.
Agreed that.
And it was pretty ruthless of her to just kill him right in front of Calder.
It's pretty awesome.
And incite his anger, but
yeah, I don't think many tears were shed though.
No, definitely not for Stour. He's a punk that.
Yeah, Ricka has this really, you didn't realize this about her until kind of those moments, but she had no problems playing this role that people expected of her as like, oh, she's a woman, she was thrust into power, she's kind of loopy and eccentric, and she's kind of timid. She like, if it was me, I would have killed Stour right away. And she's keeping him. She's trying to bargain. She's losing her friend. She doesn't have money. It's all part of that narrative that she built. She would have had no problems killing him, and she does the first chance she gets when the battle starts, which was a great scene. But yeah, and I think maybe she learned some of that from Shivers too. You can see, for people that have read like all 9 books going into this, 10 books technically, that have sat with Shivers, he's not afraid to just sit in a role but still act however he wants. So I think there's some lessons to be learned there, and making your heart of stone, of course, which we've been following the whole trilogy as well. So it all came together in that moment really well, with Stour just falling off the cliff right in front of Calder. It was it was a pretty great moment.
Yeah,
I think if Joe had just removed one line from this whole plot line, I would have been so much more satisfied, which was when she told the nail that she wanted, like, she had some special assignment for him, and that ended the chapter. And that just put my, like, that put my head on a swivel, like, knowing that something, okay, the nail's doing something. There's something important that's coming, because look, right here at the end of the chapter, she said it, and there's no resolution. So there's going to be something important. And then Rika started acting just way off the rails, and it became unbelievable to me, where I knew that there was something going on. Just if that one line wasn't there, I think I would have
that seed of doubt that
thing
was planted in your head at that moment.
Yeah, it was too much. The seed was too strong.
All right, Stephen, let's hear your favorite part.
My favorite part was the whole part in part 9, the third part of the book, the whole Tower of Chains sequence, where the trial starts, Savine's trial starts, and then gets interrupted by Leo coming in with the heroic charge that they're going to paint a picture of, and then Savine and Orso get taken to the top of the tower by Broad. Broad saves them. They do this fight, very cinematic fight on top of the tower. Like, I was picturing the whole thing and could not put the book down. And of course, this was the perfect moment for Broad to finally decide to change, because Savine tricked him with the fake letter, which I thought was brilliant and evil and cunning and very Savine.
Oh yeah. I was very suspicious of that letter from the beginning. I was like, how convenient.
And Orso once again throws himself under the bus to buy more time for Leo to get there. Corporal Tunney is telling him, we need more time. So he goes off with those denouncements, and he denounces himself last.
The tension was so high for like pages and pages, where I was just on the edge of my seat for so long. Like, I don't know of any other scene where I'm completely enraptured on the edge of my seat, wondering at any moment, like, this could all unravel and go wrong. Just, this was the best part of the book, in my opinion. Joe did such a good job here of keeping me interested.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
Okay, those are our favorite parts. So we'll have some time here to talk maybe more about some specifics of characters or any other things you guys want to pull out. But before we do that, what was going into the book? And if you can think back to your mindset going in, what you were expecting, what you weren't, what hopes and fears you had, what was the most unexpected thing that happened in The Wisdom of Crowds?
I think so. I think there were 2 very unexpected things. I'll say one now, and then if nobody says my other one later, then I'll say it, because I don't want to steal it. So everybody said, or I've seen people say that Zuri being an eater and her brothers was both predictable. It wasn't predictable for me. I didn't see that coming.
Really?
I was very suspicious of Zuri the whole time.
I didn't.
Her brothers show up out of nowhere and have creepy smiles, and like, she's got the bandages wrapped around her a little bit,
and she's like the one person we're just assumed to trust from before the story starts. Right, the whole time I was like, okay, something sneaky's going on with Zuri, but I thought she was gonna like be bad. I didn't expect her to be extra good,
So then, did you guys expect when Yoru Sulfur came in that that it was all a trap that Glokta had set for him with Ishri, or I keep saying Ishri, Zuri and her brothers. I didn't expect that either. I was like, oh crap, what are they gonna do against Yori Sulfur? Like he's always, he's always there. He's always like talking. I thought he was gonna do something when Savine had him escorted out of the Solar Society. And she's like thinking so smugly, oh, I've won. And then he just kind of lets himself be thrown out. And then later on, I guess he was just waiting for the right moment to use his eater abilities. But Glokta outthought him there.
Glokta outthought everyone. He was the Weaver, at least for now.
Yeah, I knew he had a plan, but I was not foreseeing that he had been amassing an army of eaters. But it's one of those twists that it's like, it makes perfect sense. It's like, that's what Baez did. And it's like, why wouldn't he get his own eaters? And there's plenty of eaters that hate Baez. So it's was something I wasn't expecting. I was still kind of recovering from Orso at the time. And they just hit you with like a full-on eater battle at the end. And I think Abercrombie, has been saying magic's leaving this world and all of that stuff, but to bring it back at the end and remind you that it's still there, it's a wonderful element of world building that is the first law. It's like there's still magic here, even though it doesn't seem like it, and it may not always be used for good purposes, but there are still eaters, there's still magic in the world, and there's that bitter irony of the fact that all the burners thought Zuri was an eater and she actually was. So all that beautiful stuff wrapped together. It's like Abercrombie's come such a long way 10 books later, and like the amount of layers that come into play and weave into these big reveal moments at the end, it's pretty impressive.
Well, it sounds like a lot of both you guys and other people suspected this twist, and I didn't, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because it was just such a jaw-dropping moment for me.
I knew there was something in the last act that was going to happen with Zuri, but I thought it was going to be more nefarious than it turned out to be. Would never expect she was an eater. Well, I would have believed it, but
So is Zuri Ishri?
She didn't confirm it, but yes.
Did she have? I can't remember if there were any details about her arms having wraps on them, because didn't she wrap her arms, Ishri?
Yeah, she was like covered in bandages. I don't remember if it was her arms specifically, but in the Trouble with Peace, after the battle, she's like helping Savine or something, and Savine notices that she has some bandages, but that she wasn't injured.
Got it. So yeah.
Okay, and then all right, I just remembered another thing. Do you remember when Savine is really worried about Zuri after she's captured, and then she sees Zuri again, and she talks about how Zuri has some strange markings on her hands, and she's like, oh, what torture would have caused that? So do you think that's related to her being an eater, or that's just that was just some byproduct of being tortured?
I feel like it was just torture. I think that was a misdirect.
Okay.
Could have been torture, could have been like maybe that the wrappings were taken off or something so you could see her hands. I'm not too read up on my Ishri lore.
the torturing really must have been toned down since the time that Glokta left, because to just have little pinpricks on your fingers is a lot better than not having fingers at all, which was most torture in the previous regime.
For sure. I think they were busy like raiding the city and just being crazy people that they weren't like methodically torturing somebody.
Yeah, I think I did go too much onto Theoryland, Ryan, in that one, and I saw that one coming. And I made this little video beforehand, which you can find on our YouTube channel, where I talked about, okay, what do I think is going to happen in the Wisdom of Crowds? And it's laughably bad. Like so many of my predictions are way off. But this is the one thing that I thought was going to happen, was that Zuri was going to be revealed and there was going to be some kind of eater conflict. I don't think that I necessarily said that Zuri versus Sulfur was going to happen, but I'm glad it did. That was like the one thing that I thought might happen and did happen. Everything else I was way off.
Wow, that's a good prediction though. And it's such a good idea from Glokta to do that as well.
And honestly, up until it happened, I was reading this book and I had this thought of like, is this even fantasy? Really? Like, I love the book. Is this fantasy? Like, is this in the genre? Like, there's no magic. They talk about magi. I know previous books have had magic, but there's no magic in this book at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And, they've made it a point, even beginning with, the beginning of the First Law trilogy, where Baez is like, magic is leaving the world. You can't speak to the spirits anymore. Like, that was a huge part of the first book. And then you're being constantly but subtly reminded of that as the trilogy plays out. And then he works in this whole theme of industrial revolution into this trilogy. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the whole point. And to bring it all back at the end with the Eater conflict, and then ending with Baez planning his revenge is pretty fascinating. And then when I did speak to Abercrombie, he's like, I always thought what it would be like to have a world where magic suddenly returns into the world, because there's so many books where magic leaves the world, but he was toying around with the idea of bringing magic back. So that's something we may see in the not too distant future.
Well, so the prophecy at the end of the book.
Yeah. Right. Let's
that was
go
my shocking moment.
Before I do my unexpected thing, let's talk about the prophecy, and let's talk about Baez and what we can expect next.
Yeah, because I asked Joe, I was like, so are we gonna get like a sci-fi book in the first? Are we gonna get like First Law in space? Where is this
like
going? Yeah, exactly. I was like, where is this going? And he's like, well, I always thought about writing a more modern setting where magic comes back, and you can kind of see hints of that with this ominous prophecy of Baez having new pupils who are going to come into the world and do crazy, dangerous, destructive things. But this was my kind of shocking moment, I guess. It would be this very end with Ricka and having this prophecy, because I remember I'm like, I'm almost done with this book and nothing has been resolved. And I remember having like that same feeling when I was reading the end of the First Law trilogy. I was like, I feel like there's so much to go to resolve this conflict, but I'm on the last couple of pages. And I just loved it, because it's the idea like, look, this crap is never gonna stop. It's just always going to be, we're always going to make the same mistakes and have to learn our own lessons, and there's always going to be conflict, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the good moments when they're here and appreciate them, and do good things when you can. And even if they're small things, just that little bit of good that you can bring into the world is very meaningful. And what I liked about this trilogy is there was actually a lot of good got to be injected instead of just a little. Like, I feel like Glock was like, I made a compromise with Baez and maybe I can do stuff at the end of the First Law. And now he's got Baez out of the equation of the Union completely. So it definitely has a really nice final moment. Yeah, exactly. But it was still shocking, but I loved it. I was like, oh man, Baez is planning this whole thing, the end. Okay. Like, why not? So loved it.
The whole thing with the last prophecy, I mean, so Baez is kind of, doesn't he say that he took the Weaver from a different person, the title of Weaver from a different person? I feel like people keep saying that, or maybe it was Pike.
The Weaver was when Jazal was negotiating, like when he came back from that Fellowship of the Seed. I was like, there's this guy out here. He's leading a rebellion. I'm pretty sure that's the Weaver, isn't it? And that was actually
that's the Tanner.
Oh, the Tanner.
Yeah, that was. And
I thought that was the
Sulfur was.
Yeah, and that was Sulfur. Well, I misplaced it then.
Pike says that he was just assuming the mantle of Weaver for Glockta. Is that what you're thinking, Ryan?
Okay. I mean, we see from Ricka's vision that Glockta has coined himself the Weaver, but Baez is the original Weaver.
Or the real Weaver. Or the real second Weaver. I don't know. He's the Weaver. He's now the Weaver.
And we see that he's weaving things with the cleft lip son of Black Calder.
We assume, I mean, that's not confirmed, but that is a theory.
I mean, well, they say he's Stour's half brother. So
Did they directly say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have my copy on me to check, but so I remember something like that.
I might have missed the exact. I mean, I thought it was I thought it was ambiguous, but then Calder ends like the last thing he says to Rico is, "Oh, like you think you've won, like you don't know everything."
Yeah, you know. Oh, so you don't see everything.
Yeah, implying that there was something more, which would have
that was
been
such a great moment for Calder as well, because Calder is always such a schemer, always testing, and even in facing his death, he was able. I love that line.
Yeah.
You know,
there's so many good parts of this book. So just back to the prophecy really quickly. So we see that Baez is busy weaving once again, and Hildy is going to be the new mastermind behind Valent and Bulk, and this other cleft lip boy, who we're not exactly sure of the lineage, is going to be his next person who's, I guess, going to try and conquer the North. He has Shiver's sword, which is also the Bloody Nine sword. So at some point, he's going to kill Shivers.
Maker's sword.
Yeah, which is the sword that doesn't Shivers get it from the House of the Maker?
He get it from
Shivers gets it from Logan.
Logan? Yeah, from Logan.
Or sorry, I mean, doesn't Logan get it from the House of the Maker?
It was gifted by Baez.
Okay.
He doesn't get it.
He doesn't get it from the Maker. I don't
at the Northern Library, right?
He gets it at the library.
The location where Baez was at the very end of Wisdom of Crowds,
where he was with these two pupils of his.
Okay.
Yes.
So, anyway, so we see that Baez is scheming. Everybody thinks they've beaten Baez, especially because they killed Sulfur. So they're sitting pretty high in their chair. But in the next books, I'm guessing Baez is going to strike back. But the other thing is, that ominous thing. I don't know if you guys listen to the audiobook, but you have so Stephen Pacey does this very dark voice that's like, I have returned. And that's got to be, is it Glustrad, who's the person who sided with?
Could be, because wasn't it like that this person, this being has returned from like below the earth or out of the ocean or something like that?
Yeah. So it's like in the circle or whatever. I need to look up. So Glustrad was the youngest son of the almighty Eus.
He was the demon guy.
Yeah, he was granted no gift from his father apart from his blessing. He harbored a bitter resentment towards the brothers and toward Juven especially. He allied with demons on the other side and made war on the old empire. So he is, I think it's Glustrad, this guy who they thought is beaten, but now he's coming back. The demons are going to be a threat again, and maybe this is going to bring some magic back into the world.
It's a good theory. I
don't know.
I mean, anything goes at this point, and it's always been a part of the first law, but it's never been a central part. It's always been used as a misdirect or a farce. So it wouldn't be that crazy to think that Abercrombie would come full circle on that and make it reality. So who knows?
So is this the reason why Baez really didn't do much in this? Like, I kept on expecting him from the very beginning. Well, really from the point where the Breakers and Burners burned down the Valent and Bulk office, I was like, oh man, they messed up here. They poked a sleeping bear. This is going to be really bad. Baez is coming in like he did in Last Argument of Kings. But he never did. This was like the shoe that was supposed to drop, and it never did. And like, yes, he schemed a little bit. Yes, he sent Sulfur around, and none of it went very well. But I kept on expecting him to show up at the Lord's round and just destroy everyone. And it did nothing. Is it because his magic is gone?
That's a part of it. I asked Dylan this very same question on our last first law discussion, which I think was Little Hatred. And there's also this part where Baez is a very patient guy, and he's like, you guys are like ants to me. And so I think he allows conflict to a certain extent. Like he would let Brock and Calder fight each other, even though they're both in Baez's pocket. Right. So it's like, that was my question. Like, why is Baez letting these two fight each other? It's like, aren't they on the same side? But I think his involvement is usually pretty minimal. And then I think Glokta pulled a fast one on him. It's hard to think that would be the case, but to Baez, this might just be a setback in a much longer game that goes past the lifespan of a human being or this trilogy. You know, he's like, oh, 100 years I'll be back, you know, just playing the long game.
Yeah, and I think you're pretty right, Stephen, is that Magic has been dying, and so Baez's ability to affect the world directly is very limited. And so the way that he's gotten around that is he has all these indirect means. I think the major ones are Valentin Bulk. So he loans money to who he wants to win, and the money kind of wins the war for them. And then also Yoru Sulfur is his other way that he kind of sends Yoru to try. I guess Yoru's the one who's always extending the loans.
And he's good muscle too.
Yeah, he's an eater. And so he there isn't too many ways that he can directly affect it other than that. And I think the most direct that he's been was like assembling people in when he originally got Pharaoh and Logan and Giselle all together and installed Giselle as the king, and then like helped defeat the Gurkish invasion. And then other than that, he's been hands off. And now he's kind of trying to do the same thing with Hildy and this other protege. So I feel like he's getting ready to do to move himself directly into things.
So he's just hit the reset button at this point.
Yeah. I mean, Glokta kind of forced him to do that, right?
With
destroying Valentin Bulk and kind of eliminating probably most of the people that Baez had control over.
Just eliminated most of the people. It seems like there's not many left of the big people anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can buy that. And that's a very good point that Baez plays the long game. And so while as the reader, I'm thinking like Baez just totally got whooped here. Maybe in Baez's mind, he's like, yeah, you know, lost this round, but I'm going to outlive all these people anyway. So what's the big deal?
So here's a question that I had. I mean, it's called the first law. And the first law is that you're not supposed to eat other people, right?
Touch the other side direct.
Yeah, the second law is don't eat. The first law is don't talk to the demons.
Okay. All right. Then well, my question was, I mean, these have got to be laws for a reason, right? But it seems like nobody's really interested in keeping the laws, at least the second law. Everybody's like, it seems like that's now that magic's going away, the way you make yourself stronger is to become an eater.
Yeah, and Baez doesn't care about the laws at all. He has this fantastic line at the end of the first Law trilogy where he goes, the only crime is to lose. So he'll do anything. He does not care. So, and maybe he's invoking these, you know, he has eaters, even though he has championed like, oh, eating is this horrible, vile thing that the Gurkish do and Khalul does because he's evil. But meanwhile, he's done it the whole time. He doesn't really care. He's just pushing a narrative on his enemy. So he's probably poking with these forces for sure. And will that be a consequence in future works? Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the consequence to breaking the first law seems obvious. The demons aren't really to be trusted, and like you let them into the world and they just screw everything up. So there's got to be some consequence to becoming an eater, right? Otherwise, I mean, other than just it's morally wrong to eat other people.
You can't argue with the results, though.
Yeah. And so we've had this thought for a while that Baez himself could be an eater. Right. It's not too subtle at the end of the Heroes, especially when they're sitting outside all the graves and he's eating his his meat right there, right?
Yeah.
But maybe that is indeed just a big misdirect on Abercrombie's part, and bias isn't, because you think, I don't know, maybe he's playing the long game, but maybe if he had that ability, the eater power, I mean, it doesn't seem like the eater power is leaving the world, that those eaters are still just as strong as they used to be. Maybe the bias magic power is not as strong as it used to be.
I think Baez is setting his sights a little higher. Like we've seen him use the seed in combination with magic, in combination with things from the maker, and like he's trying to touch. Though he wants to be greater than Eos, so to him an eater is just another tool. Maybe he has dabbled in that magic, perhaps. I wouldn't be surprised, but it might almost be beneath him at some level. He'd probably just prefer other people do it, and he's pursuing these higher feats of magic and finance also. So what's to say? I
like
love
that.
his character. I love Bias.
He's just like a great, I mean, a person who you think almost through the entire first trilogy is like a good guy. And then at the end of it, you're like, maybe this guy's not that good. And then in the standalone books, you're like, no, this guy's probably not good. And then now you're like, he's definitely not good.
I just love how his like all powerful malevolent force is balanced by his absolute pettiness at the same time. Like here's someone who like has lived forever, who knows everything, who's like the most powerful guy in the world, and he's also so petty at the same time. It's great. I love it. He's always bragging, and he's always like talking down to people, and he's always like, I'm greater than everyone. It's just like, dude, give it a rest.
There were a lot of really good moments that call back to previous moments, and the ending with him at the Great Northern Library was one. I like that Clover saw him and thought that he was a woodcutter, kind of like when Logan thought that he was the butcher. Both can be dangerous, right? But
he just fits the role that is convenient.
Yeah. And then on the other side, Glokta, who has now kind of become the thing that he set out to destroy, has the same kind of conversation with Vic across at the squares board, right? So many little callbacks, and Abercrombie loves that kind of stuff, and so do I. I'm a very organized person, and I really like these types of things.
And I like when you can tell that this world has changed and that the themes have changed, because with Vic, that's such a great moment too. And it's one that I've championed as someone that's watched a lot of movies and read a lot of fantasy books. I'm like, why doesn't this guy just stay home? Like, wouldn't it be so much better if half these guys just like sat by the river and didn't do anything all day? Like, why go through all of this? And which helps you kind of relate to someone like Clover, who, even though he does horrible things, I love his ending where he just sits down by the water and he's like, finally, like, this is my life goal. And then someone like Vic, who's just like, no, I don't want to be a part of this. I refuse, and walks away. And I mean, that's kind of how far we've come from the first Law trilogy, the point now where it's like trying to do the best with what you have, and maybe the political theater isn't everything, and it's more of a farce than we thought, and making your own moments is everything, and walking away from the game is a very valid option that you have available to you as a human being. So I loved it. I loved Vic's ending.
Not many people survive long enough to walk away.
Yeah, it's certainly a privilege in the first Law world, but
I mean, maybe Logan is somewhere. He survived and walked away. Maybe he was just walking off to some random death in a ditch somewhere. But
he keeps saying he walks away, but I don't buy it. That guy is addicted to violence.
Did you guys get really strong Logan vibes from Broad's viewpoints?
I always thought he was Logan Jr.
Yeah, it was reading him. I was just like, man, this is just like Logan. He's like, oh, I'm gonna do better. And then he falls back.
Yeah, I think it was a more transparent take on Logan. This idea that we say we're good people and we say that we're heroes and then we do horrible things. And it's like, just, there's not evil people that going around committing horrible acts. Like, horrible acts can be committed by people who aren't trying to be evil. And that's such a complex world that Abercrombie goes into. And one of the things I wish I had asked him and never did was his thoughts on redemption, because you have characters like, can Broad be redeemed? Does that even mean anything in his world? And can Logan be redeemed? Like, these are people that killed their friends, killed children, it did horrible things, but yet we still find them very relatable, and we don't consider them evil by any means. So can you commit an act as horrible as murder and still be forgiven? It seems like some of these characters do get away with it. Like, Logan gets to ride off into the sunset, even though he estranges his adopted family. Broad, he has to leave his family, but he's secretly kind of excited about it. And so you're like, what's going on with these people? And I think the whole idea is
Gorst
these actions are false. Yeah.
Gorst died feeling like he redeemed himself.
Yeah, wasn't the name of that chapter Redemption or something?
Yep.
Yeah, but Gorst is interesting because he always did kind of feel guilty, and he always was self-loathing, and he never lied to himself about who he was. Characters like Broad and characters like Logan are you could say are in denial about the horrible acts they commit. The stories they tell themselves is like, oh man, if my wife ever comes back, I'm just going to stay with her and never do these horrible things again. And then he lasts 2 seconds. Same thing with Logan. It's like, oh, like, leave the fighting to people dumb enough to do it like me. It's like, you could just stay with Pharaoh right now and not go off and settle scores in the North, So it's like, whereas poor Gorst, he always hated himself and saw through his hypocrisy. And it was Finry who called him out on it so directly, and I don't think he's recovered from that. And he's always like, tell your mother she always had a great judge of character, or like, she was always valued her opinion, or whatever he kept saying about her. It's because he knows it's true.
I remember in your interview though, Charles, you did ask him something about, or somehow you got on the topic of like, can people change? And I don't remember exactly what Joe said, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he seemed to be a little cynical about this idea, and seemed to think that, while people can change, he was a bit wary of these large stories of these huge twists in people's core being.
Yeah, one of his things that he was talking about that I think Dylan and I both kind of caught on to and really loved about the first law, but never really pinned it down, was this idea of characters learning their lessons and then unlearning their lessons. And he made this point of when you lose weight, you don't lose it for good. Sometimes you put the weight back on and you go back and forth. And actually, we got to talking about his psychology background when he was getting his bachelor's in psychology. And he actually wrote his whole thesis on failure and how people react to failure. And he said he was always fascinated in things going wrong, and this idea of characters unlearning their lessons, and then this world where everything just goes to catastrophic failure. Like, he just loves putting his characters in these moments, and like the Fellowship of the Seed, for example, when that quest was a failure. And he's like, sometimes people, it's hit or miss for people, but it's something that always has fascinated him as an author. And it makes, I'm like, how am I not surprised that you're the one, right? You wrote your thesis on failure. Like, these books are so depressing. Everyone fails in these books, but there's something fascinating about it. Like how normal people react to catastrophic failure. You have to face it somehow, but it's so absurd at the same time.
Okay. So Leo had a catastrophic failure at the end of The Trouble with Peace. We haven't talked about him much. He's a big character. He had a really big character shift, I thought, in this book, where he basically went from muscle-brained idiot in the first two books to this savvy and really evil politician by the end of The Wisdom of Crowds. So what was your guys' take on Leo? Because personally, I thought the shift was maybe a little abrupt, but it needed to be in order for the plot to play out the way that the plot needed to. So Leo had to become this, he had to get in this situation. I guess I just wish there was like more time with Glokta. You have, his crippling disability making him so cynical and evil over years, and it seems so natural that he sat with this forever and he turned into the man that he was. Leo seemed a little fast to me. I'm not gonna lie. This was a bit of a criticism I had of the book.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think things were accelerated by him being betrayed by Rika.
Yeah,
and
the events definitely accelerated. So that, I think that would be the explanation that I would buy.
Yeah, I hated him. I mean, I thought he was fairly well written, but when he killed Orso, it's just like, oh man, Leo, you are gonna die someday.
Yeah,
but
I'm Team Orso all the way.
He's just so frustrating, and I feel like you see him especially with like Savine, where he's like, oh, I should want to save my wife, and then he's like putting on a brave face, but really he's just like, I just kind of want to be in power. I just want to be out fighting people with like people at my command, and I want to be trampling over people with my horse, and then I want to be painted, making it look so heroic.
That's such a great way to write that scene. I loved it.
Yeah, and so he's just, I guess, becoming the evil, corrupt core of Adua, which the Great Change was trying to fix. It's ironic because the Great Change almost changed him into what it was trying to change people out of.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he learned some lessons, and he's no Glokta by any means. Even still, like, he's totally clueless that this stuff is going on behind the scenes. He's slowly learning, I think, and he had to be embarrassed quite a bit. He had to be defeated quite a bit, and he had to be like half his body had to get blown off for him to like even begin to piece together that he needs to start figuring stuff out for himself and maybe practice a little caution. And even towards the end, he was still losing debates with his wife and couldn't get a grip on the council. And I think that's why he's been resorting to some of these more ruthless tactics, because he doesn't have the patience or the mental agility to be like a Glokta type or even to keep up with Savine. But what he does have over Savine is the ability to be ruthless and use brute force, which Savine has never been capable of doing. So he's like, oh, you think you can like sneak around and like let Orso escape and pretend you don't know and have all these secret meetings. Well, I'm just going to, go find him and hang him. And then I'm going to tell all your friends, if they don't do what I say, I'm going to kill them. And like, that's, that kind of trumps political maneuvering every time, at least for now. So
if you have the power to do it, then it
exactly
does.
So I think we see some of that pettiness in him and that willingness to make up for some of that lack of cleverness with the use of shocking, abrupt force. And that's almost like a bad lesson that he's learned because he wants to be the king, and that's the way he has to go about it. Like, he's not as clever as Orso or Savine. He has to be able to find some other way. He's got his likability. People will do what he says, and then he'll have no problems hanging his wife's brother/lover. I don't know. So it's crazy.
I mean, he did lose a lot of his naivety, and he I think he's capable now of deception and political maneuvering, as we saw with killing Forrest and kind of taking control and at that critical change of power.
That was probably the most surprising thing that happened.
That was a surprising moment. That's true.
That was a great twist.
Made a grab for the throne right there. That was pretty shocking.
Yeah, that is another surprising part. He's obviously not as adept at it as his wife Savine or Glokta, as she totally outmaneuvers him with the closed council. But at the end of the day, he's just kind of like a baby, right? Like, he doesn't get his way, and he realizes that Savine has outmaneuvered and beat him. And like, he did kill Orso, but Savine is just, so ruthless to him after that. And he like basically starts crying in the close council. He's like, is this what is gonna like so now like what do I do? Like I can't do anything. And she's like,
Right.
oh my gosh, like thinking to herself, like, this is really pathetic of Orso or of Leo. And it's frustrating that Leo won and killed Orso, because you're like, Orso would have been so much better for the nation. And but the one thing that he said that was, I think, really chilling to me as a reader was like he says to Savine, if you really wanted Orso to live, like you could have, you weren't begging, like you were sad, you were crying that Orso died, but you knew that it had to happen for us to stay in power.
That conversation was fantastic. That ending, yes. Keep on going, Ryan.
And well, I mean, that's kind of what it was chilling to me, because I felt like Savine was like she was almost redeeming herself, becoming like, I thought she was doing these things for, maybe I was tricked, but I thought she was doing like these things out of just purely for the good, that she was kind of sick of, and maybe she was at first, like after she had just given birth, but then she just starts to slip into her old ways. And by the end of the book, she's back to her ruthless self. I think she's learned some lessons on how to make herself appear more likable with using like the media and Spilly and Swarbrick. But that was chilling, because I realized that, like, Savine she hasn't really changed for the better.
Yeah, we talked about characters unlearning their lessons. Savine's kind of a compromise in some way. I feel like if she could have come up with a way to save Orso, she may have rolled the dice on it. But once she realized he was walking towards the gangplank, she knew there was nothing she could do, and she went with it, which is such a cold, brutal thing to do. But she did go with it when she saw there was no other alternative. And Orso even says, I don't blame you for it, it's what it is. And Savine has always been trying to figure out where the line is for things like this. She's trying to discover her own morality, and she's never quite pinned it down. She tries to do good things, she tries to do horrible things, like she's betrayed Orso and then saved him a bunch of times, and it's trying to figure it out, and there's no good answer. And it was, like you said, that conversation was so, like, when Leo calls her out on it, granted she didn't really have a choice at that point, but she could have at least said something in defiance, and she didn't. She saw the cards on the table and went with the winning side.
She didn't deny it.
Yeah.
So I mean, we see so many characters, I think, change for the worse. At least they realize that being good isn't getting them anywhere, or won't get them further. And we see that with another very surprising moment with Rika, where she ultimately betrays Orso to his death. And so, I mean, that was my second very surprising moment, when she used her own prophecy to, like, as the justification to bring that moment to pass, where she was like, I now realize that I am the owl and you're the lamb. And so that's kind of why I think that's how she justified it to herself, turning in Orso. Were there any characters besides Orso who you feel like changed for the better?
I do.
One final note on Savine. I got to do one more note on Savine, because
Steven's got to say his piece on Savine.
One more, yeah. So I've had a crush on her for way too long. It's unhealthy, but anyway,
It's a dangerous pick, friend. Very dangerous.
It really is. But the line from her that really summarized her character is when she said that if she had to do it again, she would not change anything. That summarizes her character. While she saved Orso the one time, the second time she's like, well, saved you once, man. Can't do it again. And at this point, I gotta kind of stick with my guns. So there we go.
There's realistic about these things.
Gotta be realistic. Ryan, you were asking for Rika specifically, or more characters that surprised?
No, I mean, my question was, so we've talked a lot about characters failing to become better and ultimately becoming worse. And that leads me to feel like if Orso had survived and stayed king, he would have been a king just like his dad. You know, the way that Joe Abercrombie would have written him was that he would have had all of these like noble ideas and then
Yeah,
not really
yeah.
been able to implement any of them, and kind of being a weak and effective ruler who gives into a lot of his vices. But he did. So I guess that is knowing that, or believing that, then maybe it was that good that Orso died at the point in his character arc where he couldn't have fallen back into his old ways. Anyways, my question was there anyone who you felt changed for the better?
I'd say Vic for walking away from the whole thing was a good improvement.
Yep,
And
yep.
I would say Rika she betrayed Orso out of duty to her people. And she's been trying to learn this lesson to make her heart of stone, to be an effective leader. And we talk about ruthlessness, and this is juxtaposed against the conversations that, well, not juxtaposed, it's directly compared against the conversations that Leo and Savine are having about ruthlessness and leadership. And then you've even seen it with the Burners. And it's this idea that this was a lesson that Rick has been having to learn her whole career as a political figure. And she sees the cards on the table and she recognizes there's no advantage to saving Orso, and there's everything to gain from giving him up. And even though she may have feelings for him or like him or whatever, it doesn't undo the fact that she could, with one death, put the whole North in this time of peace. And she makes that choice, and it's a sacrifice almost for her country to do something like that. And that idea of making your heart of stone was something that she fully learned, I think, with that action. And then she was able to allow her people to enjoy a time of peace, even though she had all these prophetic visions of absolute doom. You know, she's willing to make these sacrifices. And to me, that makes her perhaps the best leader we've read so far. And it also, it's like she actually got her people to have this moment of like peace and celebration, which no leader's been really able to do, except maybe what's her face from Best Served Cold? Dogman a little bit, but they were always at war. Mons Mercato, yeah, they were able to have some sort of amnesty, but they're always at war because they're
springtime in Styria, time for war.
Exactly. So is really like the one moment of true peace we really get in like the whole series, besides the beginning in Adua.
I have no additional characters to offer past Witch Arcs. No one else got better. They're all terrible people.
Yeah, they've all done some pretty horrible things, but at least Vic had the decency to walk away.
I don't know. The one comment I had with Vic's ending was that I think she's been fed up with people lying to her and deceiving her, and her trying to find a way in Adua. And she's realized that like, even though people say things are going to get better there, that they really aren't. But then her favorite book is like Tales of the Far Country or something like that by Dabo Sweet. But didn't we read that in Red Country that Dabo Sweet like embellished just like a ton of his stories?
It's all lies.
Yeah. So isn't she at the end of the book, she's just chasing another lie?
Well, she knows that too. She's like, this is all crap, but it's the hope of, she, for the first time in this book, allowed herself to believe in a cause, which she never allowed herself to do until this moment. And she firmly believed in Orso and bringing back a stable government. And she was willing to no longer side with the winner and actually hope and believe in something. And then, of course, it got totally stomped out. Leo betrayed them the minute that he could. And I think she was just disillusioned by the whole process. And she's finding hope in this idea of like adventure out in open country, like a new start, something that hasn't been corrupted yet. And she's searching for that.
Okay.
Which may be a fool's hope, but what else is she going to do? Play the Glockner role? And
what else? Yeah. What else is she going to do? She's got to go for the grasping greener somewhere. You got to have. It's like me hoping that someone will have a happy ending in these books.
Yeah.
No matter how many times I learn my lesson, I keep on hoping.
I feel like the dog man had the happiest of endings.
Yeah, he died a peaceful death with,
at ripe old age.
Yeah, decent situation around him.
Yeah.
Yep. Everyone liked him.
Yeah, a ton of people came to his funeral.
Stick to his virtues pretty much the whole time.
Didn't they say like the measure of a man is how quickly and how terribly things fall apart once he is gone?
Something like that. Yeah. I don't fully remember, but yeah, Dogman's a stand-up guy, great character, one of the truest fellows there was.
Last thing, we're running way low on time, but last thing is low-key MVP, or like most interesting character, at least from this book, was Judge, who really emerged as like a crazy but also like pretty awesome villain running the Dark Knight Rises crazy wacko people's court.
Right.
Those scenes were so great.
Yeah. That was a long part of the book, I'll say. Like the one is like this whole great change chunk that we got. I was like, okay, well, where are we going? That may be my one thing that I wanted to move on
thought
from.
Maybe
faster.
that plot element was like repeated too much. There was always another trial.
Yeah, there's always another trial. Like the place is in turmoil. Like we get it. But I mean, I think that was a huge part of this book, was to drag it on. So I wouldn't change anything, but I personally was like, I'm ready to move. So like when that scene, like you described at the tower happened, I was like, this is exciting. Finally.
Finally built to something. Yeah,
exactly. She's a great character. It's true. The mock courts were interesting. And again, I knew when it was called Wisdom of Crowds that it certainly wasn't going to be serious. It was definitely going to be like, this is what happens when you just like let the masses try and decide things. It's just pure hysteria and chaos.
I just remembered one other great moment was when Joe just completely mocked the Constitution, or was it the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence?
Hold these facts to
the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah. Like, that sounds terrible. Don't write that.
Yeah, it's a bit cheeky, but it was funny.
Yeah, he's British. He's entitled to be able to do that, right?
Do you still hold the opinion that you think that Joe Abercrombie views himself as
maybe not
Billy and Swarbrick?
That was
about that a lot.
That was my weird theory before, that Abercrombie was writing himself into the story as Swarbrick, but now that Swarbrick went crazy evil, maybe not anymore.
I was thinking the same thing, Ryan. I was like, I wonder if Stephen's opinion on Swarbrick is going to change, because I do believe he was speaking through Swarbrick in Red Country, and he was literally speaking through Swarbrick in Sharp Ends. But I think he's like gone a little bit off the reservation in Wisdom of Crowds.
Yeah, definitely.
Really hope Abercrombie thinks more of himself than who Swarbrick was.
He's like, that's probably what I would do in this, like, Batman Dark Knight Rises scenario.
All right, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you so much for being on the show. We will not throw you in the circle yet. You are still safe, my friend.
And somehow we did it. Thank you. We talked about all the characters. Well done, guys, with lead on that conversation. And thank you just so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on Phantology. Like I've said, I tell the same story every time I'm come on. You guys gave us our first break, and we're eternally grateful for that. Thank you for welcoming us into this community. We think you guys are awesome. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys, and any opportunity to collaborate, doors are always open. These are always fun.
Well, these are good friends to have. I enjoy being the friends of the friends who are
We're
friends of
all the
Joe.
friends, guys. That's the whole reveal.
We're all friends talking fantasy.
That's right.
I could probably read a book like that right about now.
Let's all just hug each other for a moment.
I haven't been able to start anything new since finishing. I don't know what to do with myself anymore.
I'm reading Sword of Kaigen. I don't know what I'm doing to myself, but Wisdom of Crowds, the Sword of Kaigen's a bit much.
That is one I still want to get to. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another Phantology Plus Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. Mm-hmm. And if you find yourself in a situation where a bunch of people are running around, burning up a city, talking about the great change, probably just keep your head down, blend right in, don't stick out, or bad things will happen to you. That's my advice for you listeners. And we will see you later.
Bye.
Adios.